Hey, this is Soldier 7 here, reporting for Right Wing Federation, and this video is going to be about protests in Nepal. Now, as some of you may know, earlier this month there was some protests that occurred in Nepal. From what I understand, it started out peacefully, but then sooner or later, eventually, it got out of hand. And the reasoning behind it is, seem to be multiple stories. Some of it has to do with corruption, which is what the protests were technically for. And it also had to do something with a social media ban. And so forth, and I guess political hypocrisy and so forth, which I'll get to in a bit. The reason why there are other protests occurring right now in Asia at the same time, or already have, in places like Indonesia and so forth. I can't name them all, but just for right now, I'm just going to talk about Nepal. Now, from what I do know, from what I understand, like I said, it started out peacefully, but then it really got out of hand eventually. Why? I don't know, but I have looked into it. There are different perspectives of how it personally got out of hand. There were some people were saying it was the protesters themselves. Some were saying it was just instigators and whatnot, or opportunists or whatnot. And and apparently I have seen some clips where it has been reported where some of the protesters and whatnot were rioting and looting and so forth, like stores and whatnot, and whatnot, which I will say I do not personally endorse. I don't think that's a good idea. Now, government facilities is one thing, but even then, I even have my limits. But one of the things I wanted to talk about this video about, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this video about the protests in Nepal, is that apparently the prime minister who stepped down and the people that were protesting against the government that the people were protesting against, the prime minister who eventually resigned was a member of the Communist Party of Nepal, which is pretty common, from what I understand at this time. Most of Nepal's government, or at least half of it, is communist. There are other communist parties in Nepal that have political power. And in my personal opinion, I think even though this was also about corruption and a social media ban and so forth, I also think this is what happens when you have communists in power, because a lot of the times when communists take over, whether if it's in a free country, like Nepal, sort of, where they at least I think they at least get to allow to elect their people, or just flat out communist countries, it seems like every time communist comes to power, something like this happens. Because when I was looking at the communist politicians in Nepal, it seemed very similar to what goes on with the Communist Party of China, where it's like you have the Communist Party, and communists always talk about social justice and wealth redistribution. And I think one of the things about the protest is it was like showing like these kids of politicians in Nepal, or government officials, of all types, I think. Like I said, the two communist parties that I'm aware of are not the only political parties in Nepal. There are others. Mostly, I think they're left-wing. After looking at it, it seems like it's mostly left-wing. Not that I'm making this just like a left-wing issue, but out of all the political parties that I looked up, in Nepal, apparently I only found two, maybe three. But yeah, another thing I was talking about when it comes to the communists, Party of Nepal, there are two types. One, I think, is considered Marxist-Leninists, and one consider themselves Maoists. From what I understand. I know that a few decades ago, there was a civil war between Nepal and armed communist militants and so forth, and which I won't get into. Although I will mention, I think one of the other reasons for the protest was something about employment or so forth. I don't know. I'm just going by for what I know, but yeah. I kind of wanted to talk about this video is that, yes, the Prime Minister who resigned was a member of one of the Communist parties of Nepal, and apparently I also looked at some of the footage of the protests, the ones that were peaceful and even some of the ones that got out of hand. Apparently there was an incident where the Communist Party was pulled down. The flag of the Communist Party was pulled down, and it was even said that some of the protesters started a fire at the Communist Party headquarters, like they burned it down or something. I'm not so sure 100%. If you know more, please do tell. But then you have some communists who claim to have shown support for the protests. It's like, okay. But yeah, it's kind of weird how communists like to talk about social justice and wealth redistribution, yet here they are with all this money and so forth. And they're not the only ones, but I'm mainly focusing on the Communist Party of Nepal right now, the two communist ones. And I'm going to talk about some communists that I've seen talked about this from other parts of the globe. And it just seems like not only was the Communist Party flag pulled down, because I saw footage of that and rumors of them burning down the Communist Party headquarters, but it also seemed that there were also some protests who had some pictures of Xi Jinping and so forth, and I think they light those up and so forth. So yeah, it seems like there were some protesters that weren't just protesting against the Communist Party of Nepal, but also against the Communist Party of China. Now, as we know, the Prime Minister who resigned and stepped down, he's been in political office for a long time, going back and forth, but it turns out he is someone who intends to be very pro Beijing, like he intends to favor the Communist Party of China over India and so forth. So yeah, so I guess yeah, there's your answer. Like, could have many of the protesters, which is some referring it as a Gen Z protest, whether if all the protesters are Gen Z or not, I'm not 100% sure, but I will say this. While I don't know what the political motive in general behind the protest in Nepal is, other than it has something to do with, yes, unemployment, corruption, and a social media ban. Apparently it wasn't just something that just came out of the blue. It was, according to some reports, it was something that was brewing up for quite a while, and then all of a sudden this just occurred. Some of the protests turned into riots, and like I said, I don't endorse that personally. I mean, I get it that Nepal doesn't have the luxury like in America and so forth, but it's just like looting and stealing from private stores and whatnot. I can't say I personally endorse that, but standing up to corruption and so forth, yeah, and a social media ban, yeah, I can understand that. I think and like I said, it looked like the intentions of the protest started out peaceful. Now, whether the majority of protesters were peaceful or not, I can't say. All I know is that it started out peaceful, but then sooner or later, eventually, it got out of hand. Military and law enforcement got involved, and things did start to cool down. But here's the thing: while the prime minister, who was a member of the Communist Party and was pro-Beijing, resigned, there has been a replacement by some lady who is going to, I guess, the acting prime minister at this time, and it said that there's going to be elections later on sometime next year in 2026. I think they said it was going to be in March. But the thing I wanted to talk about is, could this be another prime example of why you shouldn't have communism? Because even if Nepal itself is not a communist country, they have communist parties, multiple communist parties within power. And the question is will the protesters see through that and realize that? I mean, I can't speak for all the protesters in general. I don't know what all their political affiliations are. And I know that there has been some communists. I didn't see a whole lot, but I saw a part of a video where it seems like certain communists in the U.S. were trying to make it look like, oh, well, what's going on with the corruption between the government of Nepal and whatnot, especially those within the Communist Party in Nepal. They try to say that's not true communism. And that was another thing that made me wanted to do this video. When I saw that, I was like, when was the first time I heard that? I can't remember, but I've heard it so many times. When every time communists take over, what if they're freely elected and it's in a free country where people are allowed to be elected, or it's just full-blown communism where communism take over and it's complete dictatorship? I mean, it just seems like communism doesn't work, and you still have people still trying to defend, well, that's not true communism, that's true communism. Yeah. When was the first time I heard that? I've heard it quite a lot when people say when the true colors of communism are shown, this is what they say. When I think it's pretty clear we should just say that communism doesn't work in general. So there's that, but the protesters and so forth are, I guess, given the elections that will be coming up in sometime next year, and I think it's in March of 2026 when there's going to be an election in Nepal to determine everything else and so forth. And sorry if I don't explain everything that's going on. Like I heard something about Parliament being shut down and so forth, but yeah, so I don't know how everything is going on in Nepal right now. It's just that certain feedbacks and so forth and certain things that I looked into maybe wanted to do a video about this. But yeah, what will the protesters do, or how will the elections occur in March of 26 if that's when it's supposed to be? Will the Communist Party of Nepal be voted out of everything, that whatever political power they still hold on to, or will something else occur? I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to make this video too long because, like I said, and forgive me if I'm not informed with everything about Nepal, it's just certain things that I saw, I looked up about the protest and maybe wanted to do a video about this. But yeah, any takes on it, what goes on from here, yeah, please do tell. The comments are open, and yeah, that's all I'm gonna say for right now. This is Soldier of Seven. Thanks for listening.